today. Babygirl, an erotic thriller written and directed by Halina Reijn. I've been really looking forward to this movie since watching the very first trailer a couple of months ago now. It kind of has a hint of a very dark humour within it from just watching those trailers, and so that really intrigued me. So yeah, the film follows Nicole Kidman as a high-powered CEO who puts her career and family on the line when she begins an affair with a much younger intern played by Dickinson. So Babygirl is just short of 1 hour and 50 minutes, and it has a very strong setup. The movie, I'd say, for the first 45 minutes to an hour, I was locked in. I was on board. I was having a really good time. It has a very strong setup in how it sort of introduces us to our characters. You've got really strong performances from all of the cast. Antonio Banderas as the husband to Nicole Kidman's wife is great here. Nicole Kidman is also superb, really sort of conveying sort of those desires that the character is going through and sort of the turmoil inside and sort of the power struggle aspect that's going on between these characters. She just does a beautiful job at conveying all of this through her performance. And you've also got Dickinson, who is very magnetic whenever he's on the screen. There is just something very kind of mesmerising and hypnotic about his performance and how he's bringing this character to life in many ways. It's almost like he's bringing somewhat of this kind of monster to life in a way that's very subtle. And that's not just done through the performance, but through sort of how the story is constructed as well. And also with the music, which I'll touch on in a bit. But he does a really good job at giving us a character that is very complex, that there's a lot going on internally, and that does show through his performance. And it was as a result of this performance, the same with Nicole Kidman, that kept me sort of very locked in and compelled by what was happening for the first, I'd say, 45 minutes to an hour. And the movie touches on a number of very interesting themes and sort of very real human emotions and experiences that really sort of reflect the world we're in today, which is a part of what really intrigued me by this story. But unfortunately, it ultimately feels like they just flirt with those ideas. They just flirt with those themes. And like I just said, it touches on them. And that's how I felt the movie or the story only ever does when it comes to exploring those ideas. It just sort of flirts with them. And unfortunately, it's after the 45 minutes to an hour where I felt like this movie really started to derail for me. And the themes in which they do explore within their story are power. So for example, women in leadership positions. You have control, desire and identity, and just the pressure to be perfect, you know, to have the perfect image. You know, these are all explored within the story. Very real human emotions and experiences. But unfortunately, it failed to explore these themes in a way that felt like the story had something to say. You've got all these different ideas with its themes that just fail to kind of meld into one cohesive whole. As a result, for me, the conclusion was very unsatisfying, as I felt like the last hour of this movie sort of fell into generic Hallmark soap opera territory almost.
What the fuck is this?
Which was very frustrating, because up until a certain point within this movie, I was locked in, I was on board, I was having a good time. Though, you know, the frustration was sort of slowly creeping in as I was getting sort of like impatient, you could say, or restless maybe, due to the fact that I could see they were touching on a number of ideas here within the story with these characters, but then sort of fizzled out, so they didn't really kind of follow through on a lot of those ideas. And I was just sort of hoping that it would all come together within that last 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and unfortunately for me, it really didn't. You know, that last 45 minutes for me really kind of felt like they really didn't know how to really kind of wrap up everything in a way that had something to say, that had this kind of very strong, powerful, profound message maybe, or a satisfying conclusion. It's almost like they struggled. For me, it's almost as if the writing just lacked that kind of emotional, psychological complexity required to truly deliver on those very human themes that they are exploring within its story. Something that would be, or would have, this kind of very powerful, profound and strong message. And for me, that kind of showed within the writing. Yet, just to go back to the performances, I felt like that's where the performances truly did succeed, because, they did their best basically with the material that they are given, because I did feel that Nicole Kidman and Dickinson brought these characters to life in a way that said so much through how they brought the characters to life, through how they handled themselves. And then it's also heightened or elevated and aided by how Halina Reijn, the director, shoots this movie. I'm a big fan of how she shot a lot of the moments with these characters, and you'd have it was almost like they were being put under a microscope, the way the camera would kind of focus in on a character, and just the way the camera would move within certain moments, and how Nicole Kidman, for example, would be situated within the frame. And, with her performance on top of how the camera would be used in these situations, was allowing me to kind of get a good gauge on where these characters were at emotionally, psychologically. And so this is not, a disaster of a film. It's not, there are things that work, there are aspects and elements within it that worked, but I think what really let it down was its writing and that kind of the understanding or direction of where they really wanted to go with this story. Because for me, it also touches on a number of genres as well. Like there's a very dark humour within it, but it's not consistent. Again, you get that kind of glimpse into the dark humour within the first 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and it's my kind of humour, and it does work. It's very smart in how it's weaved into the writing, but then it kind of just fizzles out, like every other aspect of what it is they're trying to do with this story. They touch on some really interesting, intriguing ideas, but it all fizzles out, just like the humour. And to just touch on the performances again for a moment, the movie does a really good job right from the beginning at establishing where these characters are at. And a lot of that is purely done by the performances. Antonio Banderas and Nicole Kidman are superb, and they do a great job through their performances at allowing me to understand where they are in, at their lives in this relationship. They are great. Like Nicole Kidman plays this woman in power. She's a woman, a leader in power, and she's obviously having to try and keep this decent image, one with a family, strong work ethic and morals, but with a darker, seedier side that she's grappling with. She's grappling with these sexual desires and one's identity, and dealing with past trauma, maybe. And the reason why I say maybe is it's not that prominent. Trauma is touched on twice, from what I could tell while watching this movie. And you have a moment with Nicole Kidman's character where she hints at something in her past which could perhaps contribute to why she's feeling like she is, or why she's going through these experiences that she's going through right now. And you've also got a moment with Dickinson's character where he's laying in bed with Nicole Kidman, and he opens up to her very briefly, but again touches on something that could indicate something a lot deeper and complex to why these characters are where they're at right now in life. And again, it's a very intriguing aspect, but like a lot of other aspects within the movie, it just doesn't really go anywhere, or doesn't really dig any deeper or explore aspects of the character. But it is touched on, I felt like, very briefly. Maybe that was just me, I don't know. But it doesn't really fully delve into the past, the history of these characters. It only touches on them. And so like other aspects of this movie with the themes and the ideas, they're not really fully realised. And to just touch back on Nicole Kidman, I feel like she really does deliver a very raw performance here. There are moments where through her performance, she just creates this intensity behind what it is you're witnessing, to a point where even as a viewer, you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable, but in a good way, because she is really sort of conveying the rawness and sort of the reality of what it is that this character's going through in certain moments, whether it be sort of the sexual side of its story, or wherever she's in sort of in the professional mode or family mode. You could sense kind of the vulnerability there because of how she's bringing the character to life. It feels very real. It feels very raw. For me personally, she is one of the strongest elements or aspects when it comes to telling the story, along with Dickinson. Another one of my favourite elements within this movie that I felt really did a fantastic job at aiding its story and sort of really kind of bringing to life the themes in which they are exploring is the music. The score. I absolutely love the score within this movie. The composer is a Cristobal Tapia de Villa. Apologies if I've announced that incorrectly there. But he's the composer and he does a fantastic job at really conveying what these characters are going through psychologically, with its themes and emotionally. It sounds dirty and gorgeously reflects what the characters are feeling, supporting and bringing its themes to life. The score, along with the first half of this movie, really works, and I was on board. For me, in many ways, the music, the score, is desire and pleasure come to life through sound, and it's gorgeous, really clawing out those human emotions in a way that felt almost visceral. Like it was almost like, you were seeing or witnessing desire and pleasure, these kind of very human emotions come to life through sound. I adored the music here. It does a really, really good job at conveying what they are exploring within its story. It feels dirty, it feels sleazy, and it kind of, as a result, sucks you in. And it's this element, along with how the first half of this movie was constructed and how it played out, was superb. Like, it was working for me. I was on board, which is why it kind of really ends up being massively frustrating for me. And to just touch back on genres at the moment, because we're talking about the music, and the music does kind of play a part in sort of, when I say the film touches on different ideas and directions of where it could go, but doesn't kind of fully realize those ideas, kind of the music somewhat then also plays a part, because you'll have these pieces of music that, to me anyway, and this could very well just be me, indicate that perhaps the story was moving into more of a horror direction, just due to sort of certain pieces of music and how certain moments of the film would play out. And this is what I mean by it sort of dabbles or kind of touches on different genres as well. Like, you've got that dark humour running throughout it, but there was almost an element of horror to it, or touched on. Again, you kind of get that with the character of Samuel, played by Dickinson, this intern, where you've kind of got this kind of monster there, sort of deep down, hidden away, and it's kind of hinted at or sort of conveyed in a very subtle way through Dickinson's performance, which I like. But there are definitely moments that I felt like throughout this film where I feel like we were sort of going to lean more into that, and that kind of really sums up my overall experience with Babygirl. It kind of teases you a lot. It really sort of flirts with where they could really go with what they are exploring you. There's so much potential and promise within that first act of the movie, or the first half of this film. So yeah, Babygirl for me was a very interesting experience. It was a frustrating one because, like I said, the film had me right from the first couple of, opening minutes of this movie. The film had me and I was on board, and I could kind of get sort of the warning signs a little bit early on, but I was like, no, keeping my fingers crossed it was all going to come together, because I was liking how the story was being constructed, through the music, through the performances, through the use of the camera, everything was working, and then it just derails. And as a result, for me, Babygirl for me was this very interesting experience. You've got that very strong first act with strong performances, great score, a very intriguing premise that has a lot of potential to really give us something powerful and profound. there are still intense moments throughout. You know, you've got moments that evoke the right emotions, which makes you uncomfortable and dirty. You sense the rawness through the performances. The performances add the rawness to the story that I felt like it really needs. But again, nothing really fully transpires from these moments that give them the weight within its story by the time we get to the climax. Ultimately, the story went into a direction that felt pretty flat in its execution. And that's about the best way I can explain it. You kind of got this kind of real 45 minute to 50 minutes maybe or an hour of a thrill ride, where it sort of sucks you into this sort of dirty, psychologically complex experience. And then it all just sort of fizzles out very quickly. And this is just my personal opinion. This is how I felt. There are people out there that have really enjoyed this movie, that have loved it. And it's not exactly low on Rotten Tomatoes. But for me, it just really didn't come together. All those ideas that they're exploring, all these themes that they are exploring, doesn't fully sort of come together to create an experience that felt like it had something really powerful to say and sort of leave any sort of impact. Going into that final act and how the story concludes, it all felt very flat for me, unfortunately. But there's a lot to like, there's a lot to appreciate within this movie, and so I do recommend it. It's not going to be for everyone, and for me, it's definitely a movie that I'm going to revisit in the future, because it was interesting, it was intriguing, and maybe my opinion of it will change. I might think it's worse, I might think it's better, I don't know. But at the moment, that's where I stand with Babygirl, and so yeah, enough rambling. They are my thoughts on Babygirl, and I would be giving Babygirl a 5.5 out of 10. So yeah, they're my thoughts on Babygirl, but what do you guys think? Have you seen it yet? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek ramble on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. My next movie review will be for Wolfman, which releases next Friday here in the UK. I am really looking forward to it. I'm a big fan of Leigh Whannell as a director. I absolutely loved what he did with The Invisible Man, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's done here with Wolfman. In fact, I've actually got a review up of the original Universal Wolfman on my channel. I did it as a Halloween special one year, so if you want to check that out, I will leave a link here. I'm a big fan of that original movie. I've also done a series of videos, just sort of, I mean, everyone does it. I really enjoy sort of looking back on the previous year and doing my top 10 favourites, my top 10 worst, and all of that, and just sort of reflecting and on film from the previous year. And so I've got a number of videos that I've done where you got my top 10 favourites, which is an interesting list, because if you compare it to the list before last year's, you know, there's kind of a somewhat different selection of movies. And I just did a video that I've not done before, which is where I really kind of wanted to show my love for the soundtrack side of film. I'm a big fan of music in general, and so you've got my top 10 favourite soundtracks of 2024 as well, which dropped a couple of days ago. But if you want to check those out, I will leave the links below, and I will leave them here somewhere. And I just want to finish off with just thanking you all for joining me on this journey, whether you be old or new, you know, just connecting with the channel, whether it be liking, commenting, subscribing. It means an awful lot, and I know I've said this 100 times before, but it will always overwhelm me that so many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film. But I absolutely love doing this, and I'm looking forward to evolving the channel and growing the channel into 2025. I've got a few ideas of where I want to go with this channel, or how I want to expand with this channel in terms of what type of videos I do, and even collabs maybe. I mean, that is definitely something that's on the cards for me, where I would like to connect to fellow YouTubers who do the same thing, share their passion of filming like-minded people, because I think it's a good way of kind of just really getting some authentic discussions and interesting discussions around film when you've got different people with different views maybe, or you might have the same views. But yeah, a lot of ideas. Maybe if you've got any that you would like to see from me, from my channel, let me know in the comments below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.